You ever hear a car that looks like it wants to punch you in the face but sounds like it's asking for a hug? This is the 1997 Dodge Viper Gen 2, an icon of American insanity. An 8-liter V10, over 400 horsepower, barely enough traction to be legal, and styling that screams, I probably got kicked out of Le Mans for starting a bar fight. But the sound always came up short. Throw on any aftermarket exhaust and the Viper still has one glaring issue: its reputation. It either drones you into submission or has a buzz like a vacuum stuck in a wind tunnel. Owners like that raw, aggressive bark, but they also want something refined, balanced, clean. This customer came in chasing exactly that. Less headache, more harmony, and with a set of leaking headers and an exhaust that left him tolerating the drive, not enjoying it. So we took this as the perfect excuse to try something we've always wanted to: a totally different exhaust. No cookie cutter bolt-ons, no just make it louder. We're here to build a tone that says sports car, not semi-truck. And the way we're doing it, let's just say it's not something you're gonna find on the Viper forums. Now, if you're into custom Viper exhaust or just wondering why no one's nailed the V10 note before, stick around. We're not chasing decibels, we're chasing distinction. And hey, if this makes your OEM system feel like a leaf blower, feel free to cry quietly while subscribing. We don't judge out loud. Gen 2 Viper rolls in. Customer says he's had it with the exhaust and wants a quote on us doing the whole thing. But talking to him reveals that he's really not concerned about the sound or the power or your typical exhaust concerns that would make you want to come to a shop like FMU. What he is concerned, and what you might see leaking around me here, is smoke, exhaust leaks. He has a bunch of exhaust leaks that he's not exactly thrilled with that are causing him various problems, smells, check engine lights. He just wants to get rid of it all. Now, here's the problem. Taking a look at this thing, it's actually not that bad of a setup. We've got an X-pipe, not my favorite use of an X-pipe back here, but if you know anything about the Vipers, most of the time the exhaust runs down the sides of the vehicle. So Gen 1, they ran straight out the sides. A lot of people would burn their legs on them. Gen 2, it runs through the rocker panels, back to the middle, out the rear end. More or less, this exhaust setup's pretty much ideal. Ideal diameter, ideal placement. I'd like this X a little further forward, but we're splitting hairs here. Is there really anything to improve? And why should I improve anything if we're dealing with the problem? So before we even started quoting out an exhaust and running numbers up, I wanted to see what we're trying to fix. And right away, we see lots of leaks, but here's the one I'm most worried about. Now, Vipers aren't exactly known for their cubic inch per horsepower numbers. 8 liters, pushing out about 450 horsepower, I think, on this GTS. They do benefit from typical bolt-on modification. Anything you could do to get them breathing in and out a little easier, intake exhaust, generally ends up in easy horsepower. These headers are actually pretty well designed for the most part. There's a few other brands out there that are not stainless steel. These are, no magnetic. And what we got, and then you can see it, is we got a pretty nasty leak up here. And you can see this thing is just pissing out smoke. Jeez. Now, if you look here, we have this line that basically shows where the connector has started to move backwards. Now, right away, I'm thinking, is the exhaust system not quite designed in a way that is allowing this thing to make full contact forward? Also, we have no way of keeping the tension forward on this thing. There's no mounting system, no header springs, nothing weird like that that would keep this thing sealed. But my main concern is these things probably are pretty tricky to get in and out. This isn't like some of the other systems out there that are 2-piece and the collectors are, however they get in there. This looks like you've got to get all 5 of those tubes in there and then get the collector over that, which means you're probably prying and pushing on this thing a good amount. And if this thing pulled back, that means the exhaust system's probably pulling it back, which means it probably isn't designed the best way to allow this thing to seat fully on there. So even if we could correct this by pushing this forward, what if we had a problem like a crack inside of the collector that we can't see unless we remove it? So as much as this guy wants us to get him a price before we get going on the exhaust, I really need to see what's going on with this collector, because we could just get into fixing this collector, maybe adding a section here to allow this to push forward a little bit more, adding some sort of retaining system that keeps that collector on there on each side, and then just calling it a day, fixing his leak problems. You know, maybe we don't optimize the exhaust in your typical FMU way, but why give him a price on going the full boat if his main goal is just getting his annoying exhaust to not be so annoying? So we're going to recommend that to the customer, a little bit of diag and a little bit of discovery, see if we can save that collector, see if we can modify this exhaust. But if he's still hunting for our rendition of what a Viper could sound like, we could still offer him that. But let's get this thing fixed up first. All right, we showed you guys before that these collectors were giving us issues, leaking, and what we ended up doing was ordering a collector from Burns Stainless. Now, why did we go ahead and order it when we have a fabrication shop? Couldn't we have made our own? Couldn't we have fixed this? Well, there's a lot of things involved there, and what you got to see is there's already a bunch of welds on this thing. Now, we were leaking from internally here, which means this would have to be cut apart at the very least on those welds, and then we would have to attempt to reseal it with whatever that metal is in there. Is it great quality? How thick is it? Who knows? Then we'd have to put it back together, and then we'd have to test it again. Now, all this, we're burning up time, charging the customer, and when all is said and done, maybe we're spending 3 hours on each collector, maybe more, only to find out it leaks again, meaning the customer paid a bunch of money to have us fix a sub-performing part, when for the same amount of money, we could go with something that would slip on, fit, has already been welded, and was tested when it came out of the factory. So that's what we chose to do. These are from Burns Stainless. They've got a really nice, much better bullet merge on the inside. And these are swedged up here. Cody had to mess with it a little bit to get it fit in there, but came out pretty good, and this gives us the opportunity to run V-bands on here.
Waiting weeks for a header collector gives a man time to reflect. And somewhere in that silence, he decided a Band-Aid wasn't going to cut it. If the car was already here, why not find out what kind of chaos we'd cook up instead?
Now that we've got the collectors more or less set in place, hopefully that's going to take care of the leaking issue. We've got to figure out this exhaust and where we're going to be able to run one of the more interesting things that we end up running on our exhaust, which is the megaphones. Now let's go over the plan on what we're actually trying to accomplish and why it's any different than people have done before on these cars. First of all, we're already dealing with headers, and that's really the main reason why it came in here, was the collectors were leaking. So we need to figure out a way to get those collectors fixed and on to our system and do the things that we want to do, but it's all about space and where we have the space to do it. Now, the non-negotiables for me are using the megaphones and making sure that we have this thing properly resonated to control this thing from getting away and sounding too truckish, like they mostly all do. Where do the megaphones go? The idea here is we're going to try to fit them in each side. My fear, though, is that if we use them too far forward, it'll create a louder, more hollow sound. So we want to get rid of some of the buzziness right away. Bottle resonators before the megaphone, and then amplifying that afterwards before we take the turn back underneath the car. Now you'll notice that we are doing this system out of 3-inch, which weirdly breaks my 1 inch per 100 horsepower rule, right? The one that you guys seem to think that I'm so steadfast on. And I'll tell you why that's being done. We're going full 3-inch all the way back this way until we get to this section, which will be something that I like using on more exotic and V10, trying to change the tone, which is a zipper pipe. Typically with an X, we can tend to cross the banks over smoothly, but with the zipper, the acoustics end up being a little bit more high strung, you will.
but usually at the cost of a little bit of turbulence depending on where you do it, because you have that length that you're going to be merging it out of. So because this is at the rear, we want to get rid of a lot of the weirdness early on. So again, bottle resonators, hopefully we can fit some ultra quiets before we hit the zipper pipe. And then depending what we have room left on, we possibly could have 2 additional resonators and a straight through section coming out the back end. So do we go to a big single? Do we go to 3 tips? That's what we're still trying to decide on, really what we have room for, but this could be valved, being that we would have, I don't want to call it straight through because we do have some resonance and muffling mitigation going on before we get to this guy, but this could keep it loud enough so that way when you want to get on it, it still sounds like a Viper, but when you get it shut, the valve closed, this thing can be cruised to dinner and still have all the refinement that Vipers have known to kind of come with, you know, kind of has a little bit of more classiness than a Corvette, and don't kill me in the comments, but that's what we want to keep, give you both options. Hopefully this system could do it, but I can't wait to see how this zipper pipe and these megaphones are going to treat this Viper.
So with this Viper, we got this nice little side skirt that sits on the side. And normally I would want to put a megaphone right here, but the total diameter of that megaphone comes out to 5 inches wide. And from this part, it would be touching the heat shielding on each side. We don't really want that. Right where this comes down, it's nice and close, but it looks like out here towards the back, we'll actually have a little bit more room to put that full-size megaphone on there. And that's how big we're working with. So if we end up sticking it right here, that still leaves us a little bit of room on each side so that we're not squished up against the heat shielding. So now we got to get out of the collector and down to the side pipe area and kind of start that section. From this point, I can kind of already tell that we're going to need something close to a 90-degree angle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a 45, and that's going to kind of push us out in the right area. And then from there, I'm going to grab an angle finder, put it on there, and try and get as straight as possible. Because if you don't have it straight, you're either going to go up, you're going to go in, you're going to, push it out. It's really important to have this angle is exactly perfect so that it's a nice straight, even tube going to the back.
Whoa. Cody, I've never heard a Viper sound like that. Not even close. And I've heard a lot of Vipers. And we put megaphones on a lot of cars, and that is by far the biggest change I've heard. And we haven't even gotten to the merge yet. It still needs the merge. I can hear how it kind of sounds like 2 5-cylinder engines, but this sounds more like a V10 than these things typically sound. Typically they have that like truck depth to it and you just never get anything out of it. But this, I haven't heard one sound like this, man. This is kind of surprising me. I want to get to that zipper pipe and see what happens when we get there, but this is actually pretty surprising. All right, so you guys heard it from the megaphones coming out, and we were on the path to a really great sound. But a lot of times when you're doing exhaust, it's not just where it terminates, and you don't get the same sound profile that you would if it was just dumped or open short. Hence, having open headers or dump pipes might sound a lot different than a straight pipe system. Now, Cody's got some really tight bends that he's had to get in a few places. The Vipers have a challenging and unique exhaust setup where they run out the sides, then back underneath the car, and then back out. So, man, look at these turns here, Cody. What did you have to do to get these in place?
So, basically, at the end of the megaphone, we had a tight turn in, and then we kind of had to go kick it over, get it towards this frame rail, and then obviously we have to go up and over the frame rail. So we have a 90 and an 80-degree bend here just to kind of get it in the right direction.
Yeah, where we can point back out. Now, like I've been explaining, and since you've been here, every turn and bend you make in an exhaust system adds a tone or changes the tone. There's a lot of bends here, so it's possible that this is going to change the way that those megaphones were sounding I'd like to hear it, kind of where we're at now, just to see what we still have to do, because it had a pretty good tone out of those megaphones. It wasn't crazy loud, but sometimes it'll induce some weird stuff in there that we'll have to dial back out. So I'd say let's rip it real quick and make sure we're on the right path.
There's a lot of rasping it now.
Well, this is kind of what I was thinking. Basically, in order to dial that out, we need a merge, and then we need an expansion. I think that's why I was so dead set on doing the zipper pipe, is we're gonna merge those as opposed to just blending them back out. Also why I wanted to go with 3-inch over the 2.5, because we're gonna be necking it down in that zipper pipe. So we wanna try to keep the total volume kind of in the same area, and knowing that we're gonna be going through that restriction, more or less, even though it's not really a restriction, that it's necking down in that area, being bigger in the front end should help. I think the zipper pipe's gonna clean it up, but we're probably gonna need some sort of resonator. It's not crazy loud. Maybe let's throw on the ultra quiets, just stick them on there, and let's see how it sounds, and we'll kind of decide what we've got to do from this point on. I was hoping we could just get away with 2 in the rear, but I don't think that's going to be enough. And if we don't do it far enough forward, we're going to be scrambling at the end. Do you know what I mean? Like, to try to redo it. I'd rather play it safe, start the process of trying to figure out how to get those to fit now, even if you've got to make space or cut them back, than at the end and we're like, it still doesn't sound right. Because the goal here is to have this be one of the best sounding Vipers that's been done. So we're on the right track with those megaphones. I think the zipper pipe's really going to be the distinguishing factor. We've got to blend those banks back together, but that is much better. A lot of that rasp's gone. I think when we get it back in and then we can decide what we want to do about the rear, I think we're going to be dead on. But the unfortunate part is I was hoping we could just take those pipes and go back to 2, but we're going to need them in there. We're going to need those resonators. All right, so this exhaust has been much more challenging than we had initially anticipated, mostly because of the unique exhaust design that these Gen 2 Vipers have. Part of the problem is the fact that we run the side pipes coming out and then going back down under the car to try to get to the merge that we need to get to. Everything depends on where it sits, including the manner which you get the exhaust out. That all has to be thought about, where you V-band it, because you can get the pipes in there and you can weld them up, but that doesn't mean you can get them back out unless you've put that thought into disassembly as well. Part of the issue that we're having is that we need it to be tucked up into the vehicle as much as we can possibly get, because we've got a lot of weird angles to get back out the rear, which means that these pipes on the side have to not only fit underneath the side skirts, but they have to be mounted in a way that holds them up, secures them, so that way the pipes don't cause hanging further back. So what we're doing here is utilizing a exhaust mount that we used a riv nut on, additionally from the factory. So this obviously wasn't there before, but we have a nice little mounting system using a riv nut that Cody's put inside there. We're gonna fabricate a hanger to get a little bit more lift on this. And as you see, we V-banded it here. We've got the V-band where we originally showed you at the collector. And then we needed to put another one underneath here in order to get this pipe getting as flat as possible without hitting the differential. It's a very tight game, even though there's quite a bit of room under here. Now, the system that was in there was just a matter of pipes, so we're trying to fit in more resonance control in order to try to coax out the best tone of this thing and do what I want to do, which is get to a merge before we get to the rear, because I think that's going to extract the best sound and make this sound the most exotic that this V10 could possibly muster. It's a weird angle. We've got to get to the Y, follow along here, and then make a bend, and then figure out what we're going to do with tips. So it's just been a pain in the butt. I've had to have Cody redo 4 or 5 things now. He's probably getting pretty irritated at this point, but I think the results are going to be worth it once we have this thing in there and we hear how it sounds, especially with that little preview of what those megaphones were doing, just dumping out the sides.
Can we get it out of the rear? And then what do we do once we get it back here to control total volume? Are we gonna valve it? That's still to be determined. So Cody's working, he's cranking away. Let's hope that we can get this thing to come out the way that I envisioned it could.
All right, so we got the tip more or less in place. There still might be some tweaking, getting the fit and finish finalized, but the goal here was to try to do something that didn't look like everything else you're gonna see out there. This triple ellipse design is something that we've actually used on some of the Radical exhausts in the past, and I really liked it just because it isn't something you typically see all the time. The idea here is that we're gonna utilize a valve when all's said and done, 4-inch, and then the outside tips would then divert to a bottled resonator, smaller control. And in reality, those bottle resonators with the split, depending on where we put them, will also act in a little bit of a Helmholtz resonator manner, just having that split on there, even though it's not closed off. You do get sort of an effect to help mitigate some drone. However, when they're closed, we should be eliminating drone altogether. So it's kind of one of those things that we can probably hear how the overall tone is going to shape up if we got it close, if we got this system doing what we want it to do, more or less the way it is right now. So that's what I want to do. I want to see how close is this thing before we get the fit and finish and everything else, because even though we have this thing lined up, it still could take a while to get everything tucked up in here, figure out a way to get it out and back in, disassembled. But I want to hear how this sounds, so let's try it out. Pretty happy with that. It's got enough depth down low when you're starting up that it still sounds like that big 8.34 whatever liter V10 engine that these famously are known to have, but it got rid of that trucky mess that a lot of them just kind of sit there and throw out, and it's really clean at the top end, and we're really dialing in that V10-esque wail that a lot of people wish that these things had. I don't think it's too loud the way it is either. It seems pretty tame, but I think the valve will give it the ultimate ability to have the best of all worlds. I worry a little bit about the drone in that last rear section just because we're straightening out, and then that gives it an ability without changing size to bounce in there and maybe get a little bit in there. But if we go ahead and go with the bottle resonators and the valve, we pretty much mitigated this thing down to a stock level, I'm sure, while still being able to scream like that at the top end. It does have some volume to it, but it's not overbearing and it's not annoying. So I'm really happy with how this thing shaped out. We've still got the fit and finish to get in there, but overall, I think the plan as we laid out with the megaphones, the merge, the use of the zipper has really unlocked this Viper in a way that I haven't heard done yet. All right, we're out cruising, and so far, I must say, it's pretty refined. This big 8-liter motor, these tall gears, makes it pretty easy to keep drone at a minimum, even with this valve wide open. A lot of times when you open these things up, which is what a lot of aftermarket exhausts do, it just tends to bring out all of that displacement, and those straight pipes in the back just allow that drone to build up, that frequency to bounce up and down those pipes. And it just kind of gets overbearing for a lot of people and a lot of the cars I've been in. Although they sound loud and they sound boisterous, it's just oftentimes doesn't match the character of this beautiful looking sports car. So I think we've pretty much got this thing in the area that I wanted to, but I want to hear how this thing sounds when you open it up. Yeah, it is much more refined. Really does sound like a V10, similar to the BMW S85 in that same tone. And honestly,
even though that engine has a smaller displacement, I really never thought those sounded exactly the same as the V10s from Audi, even the later ones with the firing order. This thing definitely has a more refined characteristic. I'm pretty happy with it. Now you might be asking, why didn't we dyno this one? The guy came in with an exhaust and headers already. The gains would honestly be marginal if there's any gains at all. And we really couldn't get the car on the dyno to begin with because it had a lot of service that we had to take care of that was limiting the performance or stuff we didn't want to do beforehand before we got it taken care of. And that also gave us the opportunity to start the exhaust system, and plus we had to wait for the collector, which was leaking and damaged, and we didn't want to put it back on. So I've got a ton of excuses why we didn't do it, but what we can do is listen to this thing rip one last time. Yeah, I like that. After hours of fitting and fighting and fabricating the natural layout of this side exit snake, we gave the Gen 2 Viper something new, a voice that doesn't have to scream to be heard. We kept the aggression, cut the chaos, and added something that most Viper systems never had: clarity. The refined higher RPM rip and low RPM smoothness that finally makes this car feel like the exotic supercar it was priced to be. No drone, no buzz, just bold, balanced tone. Is it subtle? Not at all. But is it clean? Finally. But now, the big question, was it worth it? For a 27-year-old icon that's rarely praised for its sound, spending the extra time and money to bring out the best in the V10 might seem like a luxury, but then again, isn't that always what this car was? We've said it before, and we'll say it again. The engine gives you power, but the exhaust gives you personality. And when your car already looks like a bat out of hell, snake out of hell, don't you want it to sound like it knows what it's doing? What do you think? Did we finally make the Viper sound like something more than a sentient shop vac? Or should we have just turned up the volume and called it a day? Drop your comments, especially if you're a diehard Gen 2 owner who thinks the truck huff is a feature and not a bug. We love you guys too. Stay venomous, stay curious, and hopefully you'll catch us next time.